Hello, my name is Michael Green, and I welcome you to the 23rd episode of my podcast, Historians in Conversation, which is hosted by the University of Lodz in Poland. My guest today is Professor Boro Bronza, who is also the extraordinary ambassador of Bosnia-Herzegovina to Switzerland and Liechtenstein. Today we will be discussing with Professor Bronza his academic career, but also his non-academic career, which stems from his interest in history. So I welcome you to my podcast, and I hope that you enjoy this conversation. Professor Bronza, welcome to my podcast. I'm very glad that you agreed to dedicate some time to talk to me about your passion for history, about your academic and non-academic careers, about your childhood that probably had some influence on your academic choices, and also for your love for history. So I'm very glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. It is an honor to have this opportunity to speak with you. For I have noticed basically that your career is also very, very versatile and very, very straightforward.
It's straightforward on the online platforms, but in fact, I also had some sidewalks, but I think we can get there as we talk. So you are the first person that I'm talking to from the Balkan region, and I think it's very important for me to try to speak to people from different areas in the world, not only in Europe, but also outside of Europe. But within Europe, I've never spoken to someone from the Balkans about their academic and non-academic career path. So I'm very glad that we have this opportunity to talk. I wonder, how did your childhood, well, back then still in the former Republic of Yugoslavia, was going? Could you tell a little bit about your family, about your parents?
Actually, my family was unfortunately very much influenced by the consequences of the Second World War at the space of former Yugoslavia, where basically the family was pretty much in the position to have so many victims in the system of the concentration camps throughout the Second World War at the space of former Yugoslavia. And afterwards, it was not so easily basically for my parents because both of them have lost their fathers in 1942. And nevertheless, in the 1960s, basically their life in former Yugoslavia was, so to say, so and so. And they decided, like many people, when the opportunities have been opened in the second half of 1960s, to go abroad. So in 1969, basically they moved to Germany, to the city of Hameln, in the proximity of Hanover. Hameln is very known as so-called the Rattenfängerstadt, this story about Pied Piper Rattenfänger from Hameln. So basically I made also my first steps there in 1974. So yes, my childhood in northern Germany influenced me pretty much later on. In 1980s, I was returned to former Yugoslavia, and basically I have been schooled there. And so I was constantly somewhere between, so to say, former Yugoslavia and West Germany in that time. And I think it had actually a lot of advantages to be in those two pretty much different worlds at that time, because of course Yugoslavia was a very specific socialist country, not the part of Warsaw Pact, but somewhere between, so to say, with the possibility for people to travel freely to the west and to the east. On the other hand, West Germany and that area where I have spent my childhood in Hanover was pretty much advanced, all right, and both of my parents have been involved in the developed industry over there. And so it was nice basically to have this touch with the totally different regions and mentalities and so on. So I was shaped from the both sides, if I may say so.
And of course, you also learned both languages, I assume.
Yeah, I'm really connected with the German language since my early childhood. Yeah, and that's it. This Serbo-Croatian language that was the kind of main language of the space of former Yugoslavia, and based on the also political motivations. Today we have this story about the very separate Croatian, Serbian, Bosnian, and Montenegrin language. Out of basically the languages are more than 99% mutually intelligible. We can understand us pretty good at the space of former Yugoslavia regarding the language, although not so always regarding the political views. Okay, nevertheless, so yeah, that story between the language was also kind of advantage. I must say, regarding the influences of history as a science, I was really in position to be influenced both in Germany and even more than in the former Yugoslavia. I think that my huge love towards history was developed before my 10th birthday already, and when I was 10 or 11, it was quite clear to me that I will go for history as my primal choice regarding the science in life, and it was just like that.
This is a good point to actually start asking you about this passion for history. You just mentioned that it was already before the age of 10 that you realized that you like history. I must say that it was the same with me. I remember myself at the age of 7 or 8 typing on my grandma's typing machine list of Roman emperors and kings, and I found it fascinating. How was it for you?
Honestly, the first touch with history for me that was kind of huge influence later on was the story about the ancient Greece and the mythology. I used to swallow all the story, basically Iliad and Odyssey, when I was 8 or 9, and later on I really somehow enlarged this interest in the very ancient history and especially into Roman history. But with the time, I moved a little bit regarding the focus on these newer periods. And already when I was, I think, 17 or 18, it was quite clear to me that my main area regarding research will be actually 18th century. And it is just like that all the way up until today, so for more than 30 years. Yes, I am very, very connected with the history of 18th century.
And if you speak about your parents, about your family, were they interested in anything that had to do with history or culture?
I must say that there was no connection inside of my family regarding the history as a science, and I cannot recall anyone that was basically kind of family influence for me in that case. No, I cannot say that. No.
So
There
what
was
was
no.
the trigger?
There have been different possibilities in the school system, so yeah, I was kind of influenced by my history teachers, history professors later on, especially in the primary school. I was really amazed with my teachers. So basically, they have shaped me, especially when I was something like 9 or 10. A lot of responsibilities. I can say, of course, it is not the story only about former Yugoslavia or former West Germany, but this uh, intellectual surrounding in the, well, let's say in the middle of 1980s was definitely in general much more prominent than it is today. I think in general at that time this forcing of children in a way to take this academic path and basically to be some kind of intellectuals that was much more prominent than it is nowadays.
It's
And
interesting what you're saying, because I also noticed it in my own childhood that, well, my parents were not historians. My grandparents were interested in history. My mother was interested in history, but they were not historians. And we had a lot of books at home, and a lot of them were history books on all kind of topics, including the ancient Greek poems, etc. And none of my friends was interested in it. I think I was the only one. So I think it's interesting what you're saying about this environment that was triggering you to be interested in history and do something about it. So maybe this is the point to bring you to the end of school. and the choice, because you finished school, I assume, roughly at 1992, which
Exactly.
was a very difficult period, and we will get maybe in a moment to that period. But before we talk about it and how you felt at the time, would you tell how did you make the choice? Where to study? Was it indeed history that you wanted?
Basically, yeah, throughout gymnasium, between the 15th and 19th year of my life, this love towards history was in constant growing. And I think that my school at that stage was really, really good, really, really versatile in the northwestern part of Bosnia. Yes, and basically I was influenced by much larger possibilities, and I was amazed by this possibility also with to study history, for example, in the city of Zagreb or city of Banja Luka at that time, or I had special relations with Novi Sad in northern Serbia as well. But to be very honest with you regarding the position where I used to live, I was much more concentrated on the perspective of studying in Zagreb in Croatia, and I had relatives over there, so it was my goal pretty much in 1990, 1991 to go over there. But then the war started at the space of former Yugoslavia in 1991, and everything was completely different, all right? If you are coming from this Serbian ethnic component, it was not easily for you to go to Zagreb anymore. And so basically in 1992, when I have finished my school, I was, so to say, forced to look for other options. So I decided to study in the city of Banja Luka, which is the second largest city in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And first of all, I started parallel study of history and geography. Geography was definitely my second biggest love. I always felt huge connection between history and geography, and I tend basically to cherish that connection even nowadays. Yeah, but later on, in the third year, I decided really to go to only this historical path, and so I am qualified after 2 years of study to be teacher of geography at the lower school level. But nevertheless, I am later on I have finished Faculty of Philosophy, Department of History, and then decided also for master studies. But that was another story because there was this opportunity in Austria that I grabbed in 2002, so I left for Austria for a while.
If you come back to the idea that you said that you had the opportunity to study at a rather difficult period, I wonder how did it go with study when you were in this war situation? Because from personal experience, I know that it's not very easy to follow when
Definitely.
you don't know what is happening around you and when the next bomb is gonna fall and where.
But I can say that basically I was happy that the city of Banja Luka was never part of the something called like war line or something. It was not situation like in Sarajevo or perhaps in some other cities in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So yeah, basically you are, so to say, a little bit student at the university, then you are a little bit of soldier, but in my case, I was almost constantly at university, and that was huge advantage for me. Yes, so it was pretty much possible to study history even in 93, 94, 95. Yes, and later on in 1996, basically the things really moved swiftly with the Dayton Peace Agreement. So basically, everyone who was at university earlier was enabled basically to continue with the studies without any problem. And with the Dayton Peace Agreement in November 1995, basically the war was finished at the space of former Yugoslavia in general, not only in Croatia, but also in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it was huge wave of optimism at that time. Honestly, there was expectation that Bosnia and Herzegovina will be part of European Union in several years or something. Now, almost 30 years later, basically we are still pretty much far away from this membership, all right? Slovenia made membership like Poland in 2004. Croatia managed in 2013. On the other hand, all the other states that have been basically in creation of the space of former Yugoslavia since 1990s are still waiting to be the members of European Union, and that is the huge goal of the diplomacies of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, and so on. So basically, yeah, this wave of optimism was also connected with definitely opening of the relations with numerous countries and institutions, and it was the also possibility to for Bosnia and Herzegovina in this frame, so to say, as a new recognized state to, in a way, renew special relations with Austria. And when I say renew relations, there was this situation that basically Bosnia and Herzegovina only through one special part of the history belonged to Austro-Hungarian Empire. And it was after the Berlin Congress in 1878 up until the end of the First World War in 1918. So for 40 years, Bosnia and Herzegovina was part of Austro-Hungarian Empire and in the very special position because Bosnia and Herzegovina was only part of the empire in the front of First World War and during the First World War. It was not basically in strict Austrian or strict Hungarian part, but was ruled as kind of condominium from both sides, from both Austria and Hungary. Nevertheless, there was this special agreement that was made by the government from Vienna at that time, at the very beginning of 20th century, that Austria will finance all the students came from Bosnia and Herzegovina to study in Austria. All right, this story actually stopped in 1918 with the creation of the first Yugoslavian state and the breakup of Austria-Hungary. Of course, Austria was pretty much changed in 1918s, and this Austrian Republic was created for the very first time, and Hungary was in different situation after 1918, all right. Nevertheless, regarding the fact that newly created Austria was not in the best terms with the newly created kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes that evolved in the kingdom of Yugoslavia, it was not to expect that students will basically move from Bosnia and Herzegovina to the space of Austria, and that Austria will also continue this story from the very start of 20th century regarding the financing. So the story was restarted just at the very end of the 20th and the beginning of 21st century, and many students basically from Bosnia and Herzegovina used this opportunity to go to Austria, especially to Vienna and Graz, and basically to study there. I was not, so to say, part of that program, but nevertheless, our university in Banja Luka established very good connections with University of Graz in Austria, and especially the Institute for Southeast European History at University of Graz was very prominent in those connections that have been established at the very beginning of 21st century. And inside of that frame, regarding my connections with the now unfortunately late Professor Karl Kaser and with Professor Christian Promitzer and so on. Basically, it was possible for me to get the scholarship to study further on in Austria and Graz. So I moved there in the spring of 2002, and that was immensely important episode in my studies in general. I think that I can say, really overwhelmed by the waste opportunities over there regarding the research, and I was pretty much also shaped, I must say, at least for several years, with the very special view of Professor Karl Kaser over there regarding the development of this special school of anthropology and the history of anthropology at the space of Southeastern Europe, where Professor Kaser really developed some concepts that are still pretty much modern in the European frame. Yeah. And those professors, and I'm talking about, for example, Hannes Granditz, Ulf Brunbauer, who are now professors in Germany, if I'm not mistaken, in Regensburg and Berlin, respectively, or Robert Pichler, and many others, Ulrike Tischler, and of course, especially Harald Heppner, even earlier, and Rüdiger Mali, and many others, basically, they really shaped me and shaped my approach. So I was more than lucky, basically, to have this opportunity to also grow further on regarding the historical approach in general in Austria. And this first episode in 2002 basically was just an introduction, because later on I've been in position to have scholarships from Austria for many years of research for my PhD as well in Vienna. And so I have spent many months basically researching in Vienna's archives, especially in the State Archive in the very downtown of Vienna, and in the War Archive in the eastern part of Vienna. So yes, those have been fantastic opportunities, and I think that I, so to say, really grabbed them in the efficient way.
That's true, because I look at your CV and I'm very much impressed with the amount of scientific stays and with the degree that you made between Banja Luka and the University of Graz. So it was definitely a great chance. But I wonder, before you went for master study, you had a 2-year gap. Was it a gap that you actually used somehow to prepare for possible master study, or it was time that you were thinking maybe I should go somewhere else?
Actually, when I finished my studies in 2000, at the very beginning of 2000, uh, I was in journalism a little bit. So I worked for some magazines in Bosnia and Herzegovina, all right, and I have started to write many things. So I was in preparation for, so to say, academic job, and I was employed as assistant at the University of Banja Luka at the very beginning, but really very beginning of 2001. All right. And in 2001, it was already pretty clear that I will get this opportunity to go to Austria. All right, regarding some administrative hurdles at that time that was implemented at the beginning of 2002. So yeah, that was the start of my postgraduate studies.
And then you finished the Austrian project, and the time for PhD came. And once again, I assume for you it was very natural that you finished master's degree and then you would continue further on. And the question is if you had some particular topic in mind, or you had some particular advisor in mind. Perhaps you could tell also a little bit how does it work or worked at the time in Bosnia-Herzegovina with PhD positions.
Yeah. So basically, really regarding the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the development in the in the frame of personal in general at the universities of Sarajevo, Banja Luka, Mostar, or Tuzla, or whatever, it was pretty much tense because really the lack of professors in general at universities that time was burning issue. So in that case, I was honestly one of the first assistants with a kind of international background as well, and that was huge advantage for me. When I was in Austria, it was quite clear that I will continue regarding the PhD to delve even deeper into Austrian history of 18th century. And when I say Austrian history of 18th century, it was also pretty natural that I will delve deeper into connections between Austria and Southeastern Europe, not only with the space of Bosnia-Herzegovina throughout that time frame. And it was that was special influence of Graz, I must say. This idea basically to research, especially the diplomatic history about the diplomatic presence of Austria in Istanbul in Ottoman Empire. Of course, this internunciature of Austria in Istanbul, that was a special name for their embassy actually over there, and Austrian diplomatic presence in Istanbul was really institutionally, especially developed throughout the 18th century. And there was no doubt that the Austrian important position in Istanbul was constantly growing throughout that century. I was really overwhelmed when I was, for the first time, confronted with the fantastic records from the embassy in Istanbul somewhere like 2002, 2003. I am still inclined to think basically if you send the team of 50 people over there, they have really what to do for the lifetime. There are so many documents, so many boxes, so many, but really untouched things in Vienna regarding these opportunities for research that is simply fantastic. So yes, it was not really hard basically to find pretty much paths for research, and I was especially concentrated on the development, institutional development in the second half of 18th century. But nevertheless, I covered, so to say, more or less whole of 18th century in my research.
And I think that this is the point that your life becomes even more interesting, not only traveling to Austria and back to Bosnia, but also a new job. So could you tell a little bit about this shift? Because I see that you continued your academic career, but at the same time you went into diplomacy. And now hearing about your doctoral dissertation, it seems that you were actually continuing the line of those people in a way, or the
Exactly.
heritage of those people.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, that year, 2009, was the biggest change in my life in general. So yes, I have finished my PhD, and I was in position basically to be chosen by the presidency of Bosnia-Herzegovina for ambassadorial position. That is a little bit strange because, of course, history of diplomacy is not diplomacy per se. All right. And I was lucky, definitely, that some members of the presidency have been historians as well. So basically, they really recognized and praised my work in the history of diplomacy throughout previous years. And so, yes, I was in position to be named as ambassador of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Honestly, I was pretty much surprised with that, and it was, of course, fantastic opportunity. There was not a single second of doubt in my case that I will say no or something, that I will decline that fantastic offer that came in the summer of 2009. And um, regarding the destination, basically, it is not like that, and I'm talking about the diplomacy in general. Diplomats, professional diplomats are called career diplomats, or non-career diplomats who are so-called political appointees, like it is case with me, although I was never member of any political party and I'm still not. Basically, when you are appointed outside of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you are considered as a so-called political appointee at the position of ambassador. All ambassadors or ambassadors to be are not so in position basically to choose the destination and to say, all right, I like to go there and only there, and that's it. Basically, you are mostly in position to be confronted with one destination, and that's it. And it was just like that for me as well in 2009 when I was told that I will be ambassador in Athens in Greece. that was that was really interesting. Of course, I have spent so many years in Germany and Austria, and I was German speaking person and all right. But regarding the schedule in the system of diplomacy of Bosnia and Herzegovina, of course, Bosnia and Herzegovina has comparatively small diplomacy with the 56 embassies, all right. It was not possible for me to be somewhere at the German-speaking area, all right, at the time, and so I was deployed as ambassador in Athens, in Greece. I was only once before in Athens in 2005, and that was very interesting conference about the history in general, about the development of the history, the science, and the space of Southeastern Europe, and it was organized by the Council of Europe. And it was just several months actually after the finish of the Summer Olympics in Athens in 2004, where and when it used to be that time used to be the time of the huge optimism in Greece, all right, because many things have been nice and shiny throughout the Olympics, and it was really nice time to be there. Unfortunately, something like 4.5 years later, when I arrived as ambassador in Athens, it was a time of the huge turbulence regarding the economic downfall of the country at that time, and these economic turbulences had huge influence, devastating influence on the society as a whole. And throughout those years I have spent as ambassador in Greece between 2009 and 2013, of course, a lot of social conflicts have been on surface, but nevertheless, it was time of joy for me because life over there was really splendid. Athens is such a nice city. Greece is a so beautiful country with fantastic opportunities regarding the seasides over there that is pretty much unique, especially regarding the versatility of islands in Greece. And so it was very, very nice place to be. And regarding the mentality of people, there are very uh, traditional connections between the Greeks and especially Serbs and some other nations from the Balkan region. So there are so many similarities. So I was, to be very honest with you, on my own. So there was really no problem to have something like a special adaptation or something. Yeah. So Athens is very, very nice and very, very wide open, so to say. So it was not so hard, basically, to find your way.
So, how did history come into play with your diplomatic work? Is there any way that you are still doing something in relation with history or historical research as an ambassador? Now you're
Uh,
ambassador in Switzerland. Maybe we should just mention it again for the listeners that nowadays you are located in Bern and working there.
Already in 2013, basically, at the beginning of 2013, I was deployed in Bern as ambassador for the first time. So immediately after Athens, I was transferred to Bern to be ambassador to Swiss Confederation and so-called non-resident ambassador for Principality of Liechtenstein. And that was another episode, pretty much different, because although I have spent years in Germany and Austria, it was my very first encounter with Switzerland. And regarding the language, all right, I was again on my own, but not regarding the special dialect of the Swiss German. All right. Nevertheless, of course, everyone is speaking so-called Hochdeutsch, all right, but this very interesting situation in Switzerland regarding this a dual approach. So yeah, you have Hochdeutsch, High German in the school system, but everyone is speaking Swiss German as a dialect at home and to each other. So it is interesting to find your way. I'm talking, of course, about Bern, where I'm living right now again, and basically about the two-thirds of the territory of Switzerland. There are, of course, the French-speaking areas and even Italian-speaking area in the southeast, in the canton of Ticino. So yeah, basically, this was fantastic episode, my second one, and it also lasted for some 3.5 years between the beginning of 2013 and the July 2016. And then it ended. So after 7 years as ambassador, I returned then as professor at university. And that is the special story of this job. And I'm not talking only about my case in general, because when you are ambassador in this system of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the diplomacy in general, you are really forced, so to say, to think through this prism of mandates that are lasting mostly for 3 or 4 years. And it is not something, to be very honest, written in the stars that you will get always new mandate, new destination, new mandate, new destination, and something like that. Of course, it depends, of course, how do you work, what are your results in general, but also what is the development of the political situation in your country and so on. So yeah, I was ambassador in Greece, but through all those years, I had in my mind basically that I must also keep the track of my academic record. So every now and then, when there was possibility regarding the time, I participated on some historical conferences or held lectures as a visiting professor, even in Athens, in Greece, at some universities there, or basically returned to Banja Luka, to my home university, basically in Bosnia-Herzegovina, as a visiting professor, and so on. So yeah, my first book was published in 2012. It was basically my pretty much enlarged PhD, and my thesis, Habsburg Policy Towards Bosnia and Herzegovina 1716-1780, was basically published as a Austrian policy towards the space of Bosnia and Herzegovina between 1699 and 1788. So yeah, I think that I have managed to, so to say, enlarge my academic approach, and of course all those connections that I have gained in the time frame between 2009 and 2016 helped me further on. And when I returned in 2016 to Banja Luka as professor of early modern history, it was kind of just natural just to dive in again. But nevertheless, only two and a half years later, basically my diplomatic career started again. And I was pretty much surprised that it started on the very same destination in Bern, in Switzerland again. Because also in the system of diplomacy of Bosnia and Herzegovina, this possibility that you have even opportunity to go to the very same destination that is almost non-existent, very rare. And when I was there, basically somehow there have been some inclination that I will be deployed perhaps in Hungary or Poland or something. Nevertheless, it was Switzerland again, and to be very honest, I was more than happy with that choice because I'm I'm family man, all right. I'm married already for 25 years, and my children, I have a daughter and son. They basically started the school here in Switzerland when we came for the first time, and then in 2019, when we returned, it was possible for them to continue in the very same school with old friends, and this continuity was fantastic thing for children in general. And it was for me absolutely fabulous because from the day one when I returned at the beginning of April 2019, I was like a fish in the water, really. And it is even more special that I have managed to gain another mandate here, actually last year in March. So yeah, now I'm here constantly for more than 5 years and most probably will stay for a couple of years more.
Thank you very much for this very inspirational talk. I think that it really gives some food for thought about different directions that history can take you to, and also about the importance of choosing the right PhD topic.
Yeah,
Because
thank you very much. Yeah. Uh, with Throughout last several years, I have managed basically to explore also some new fields of research, and so my few books are also kind of testimony of that because my latest book is called Long Flight of the Imperial Eagle, Austrian Diplomacy and Trade Towards Asia 1774-1799, and that is basically the testimony of the change of the focus regarding the research of the Austrian diplomacy in the much wider area and their approach to emulate the success of the British and the Dutch at the space of Southern and Eastern Asia throughout the second half of 18th century that was not so successful in the end, but it was very illustrative. And it is the story that is not so very well known, and it is fantastic opportunity to research even further.
I will put a link to the title of the book in the podcast, so everyone who is interested in the topic would be able to find it and buy it or borrow it at their own library.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.